Change Your Life Through Love by Stella Terrill Mann. Part 2, Chapter 6, Think with the Mind of Love. When we learn to think with the mind of love, all else in our life will straighten out. If we could only start our life-changing program by such thinking, we would not consciously have to take the other steps of seeing, hearing, and speaking with love. They would be taken automatically. Few of us, however, can start at the top. Most of us will find we have to take the simple hourly exercises of actually trying to bring our desires, actions, and beliefs under the rule of good and growth for all in order to build up a consciousness or awareness of love as the moving spirit of the universe. The daily attempt to speak, listen, and look with love may seem to be a very small beginning. But if persisted in, it will lead beyond the mere awareness of the spirit of love to actual thought in harmony with that spirit. This in turn will lead to higher states of consciousness. Eventually, it results in willingness to work with God and the ability to do so. When we work with God, we cannot fail either in this world or in any world to come. To think with love means to think with honesty, courage, and fearlessness. To think of all life, including ourselves, as unlimited and good in spirit. To think with kindness, tolerance, and forgiveness about all that we know to be good. Such thoughts naturally produce acts that are progressive and good. They generate a belief in good. These acts and this faith in turn bring progressive good into our lives and affairs. Until we can think with the mind of love, we shall find, as Paul says, all else avails us nothing. As we think, so we are, so we act, and so others do unto us. The whole character of our lives, our attitude about all things, is a direct result of what we think about God. On our real belief about God depends what we think about ourselves, our fellow men, about health, wealth, happiness, work, the nature of the universe, the question of the existence of good and evil powers and of life after death. In all our thought, we are either thinking with God, nature, and things as they are, or we are thinking against them. When we think against the nature of things as they are, we develop a belief in two powers, one of which is evil with its force to overcome good or God. Once we so divide our house, as Jesus warned, the whole structure of our being is in danger. We may do no evil, but that alone will not save us. Job did no evil. He merely believed in it and so feared it. What he feared came upon him through the doctrine of the law of creation after its kind. The story of Job is the story of the human soul in travail to give birth to a consciousness of God as all good. It is the story of every childlike man's struggle to think in accord with the parent, God mind of love, by putting aside the human mind of superstition, fear, and belief in two powers. It is one of the most dramatic stories in print and should be studied by all who desire to change their lives through knowledge of spiritual laws and how to live within them. Like Job, we can all cry, "What I feared came upon me," for fear absorbs some of our most concentrated thinking. It is the strongest kind of belief in evil. We stop fearing only when we learn to think with love. Nothing less than obedience to the love commandments ever can still our fears. Nothing less than understanding them can put us in tune with the universe. When we finally see what Job eventually saw, that the spirit of all is both good and unlimited, then like Job, we shall receive more than we had in the beginning, for we shall know how to draw it to us. When we fail to think with love, we leave ourselves open to two grave dangers. The first and lesser of the two is that we fail to draw to ourselves all the good we could have. Here is an example. A businessman came to me for help. He had been a church member for all his life, and his parents before him had been church members all their lives. They were good, honest, and upright people. The man was very poor in spite of the fact that he owned his own small business, which he ran with scrupulous honesty. He could not afford to pay his office, help what other shops paid for the same work, and yet, as he often boasted, they stayed on year after year because they liked him. In interviewing the employees, I discovered most of them were afraid to leave him for higher pay elsewhere because they feared they would never get another boss quite as congenial and easy to work for as Ed. The love correspondence was working. Those employees were just as afraid of life as their employer. Ed was torn between being happy at their loyalty and grieved over his inability to pay them more. He was constantly worried and annoyed about high prices generally, and especially about the high salaries he was forced to pay his union help. His business friends called him Good Old Ed. They trusted him with their secrets, their wives, and their money. He merited their trust. But Ed complained to me that they had flourished, owned fine homes and powerful cars. He said, I know they are no smarter than I am, do not work half so hard, and many of them are very questionable in their business and personal dealings. Some of them are downright dishonest, yet they grow richer and I grow poorer every year. Ed wanted to know what was wrong with him that the hand of God was so against him. In church, Ed sang about being a worm of the dust, feeble and frail, and he thought of himself as such. His favorite and oft-repeated remark was, as my father always said, I'd rather be good and poor than rich and evil. With all his history before me, it was easy to see why Ed and his parents before him, who were equally talented, hardworking, and honest, had remained poor. For Ed's thoughts were not with making money. His mind actually was against it. His thoughts, his whole heart, centered on being good, and in his secret heart he could not accept money as good, no matter how greatly he desired it, how badly he needed it, nor how much he talked about it. Ed secretly believed money was evil. His parents had so believed and so taught him. He thought that anyone had to be a little evil if they were to acquire abundance, and that most people were very evil if they had managed to create a fortune. He was living up to his and his father's life motto. He was good and poor. Ed did not think with the mind of love, which is all creative, generous beyond our wildest hopes, prolific, abundant, eager to serve, and promote the welfare of man. Ed thought against the very nature of love. He thought in terms of scarcity, limitation, and poverty. When I said, you have no faith in God, yourself nor your fellow men, he was shocked to speechlessness. While I had him at a disadvantage, I hammered home a few more truths he needed to know if he was to right his life and affairs. You do not really love God, your fellow men, or yourself. You are actually thumping your chest and thanking God that you are not as sinful as other men. You wear your self-inflicted poverty, which robs your employees, your family, and yourself as a badge of honor, as a mark of moral superiority. You believe in a God of poverty and punishment. You are making God in your own image and likeness. You think God is dealing unfairly with you, who are honest. You believe he is prospering evil men, and you are very much hurt because he does not punish them and prosper you instead. After Ed had recovered from the stabs of my pointed facts, he began to realize that harsh as they were, my words were truth. Only after his confession could he begin to right his life and affairs. He learned there is no value whatever in any material thing, whether it is gold or a clod of clay. The value lies in what we think about them. Real values are spiritual and never material. That is why Jesus instructed us to seek first the kingdom of God, the place where the spirit of love dwells, in order to find this inner power by which we can create all the good we shall ever need. That is why he taught that we do not have to envy others. Ed learned that gold and a lump of clay are equally good, and that things are acquired through using the powers given us, whether or not these things are good or evil. We can get things through an evil desire and purpose and put them to an evil use quite as readily as we can achieve good by good for good. But we must pay the penalty for evil. Evil means anything that is contrary to all good and to all growth toward that good. Ed was using the power of creating to create poverty for himself. His business friends were using the same power to create good for themselves. Ed desired to be good. He asked, thought, and prayed to be good. He believed that he was good, far better than most men. But he also believed that in order to be good, he had to be poor. Ed believed money to be evil. He wanted nothing to do with evil, so the law kept money away from him at his own request. Ed's business friends desired things, worked for them, asked for them, believed they would receive them, loved and welcomed them. They loved money. They saw no evil in money. They thought of it as all good, in fact, about the highest good they could obtain. They expected money to come to them and asked for it by word, deed, and thought. Not a one of those successful businessmen thought of himself as being a worm of the dust, feeble or frail. True, some of them were breaking the laws of love in their desires and acts, thoughts and words. Ed was right in thinking that the illness, worry, tragedies, and the drinking of some of his friends grew out of their efforts to make a pile of money. Their inner lord, conscience, was angry with them. Ed finally saw that his own inner lord was angry with him for remaining in poverty, for underpaying his good and faithful employees. One of them had not had a raise in 10 years. For failing to see God's work as good, and for failing to call on, believe in, and use the abundance provided him from the beginning of the world. Eventually, Ed got it into these words: "It is a sin to remain poor when God has supplied us with such abundance for the asking." Failure to claim and use that which is ours is the lesser danger of failing to think with love. There is a greater danger in that by failing to think with love, we leave ourselves susceptible to plotting against God or the nature of good. There is no neutral course. We are for or against good. We may be ignorantly against good, as was Ed. When we are knowingly against good, we set up a private power all our own in opposition to God's plans for good for all men and think we can outwit God. Oh, we never get it into those words. We just become spiritual outlaws with a might makes right motto of life. We learn to use the doctrine of the law of creation after its kind on the level of sheer willpower. We use it to overcome all those below our own level of understanding. We see this done every day in the form of sales psychology. For example, we see some of our best art and brains put to work for the advertising of alcoholic liquor. Once we are inclined toward evil for personal gain, we begin to ride roughshod over our fellow men until they stop us or until we put a rope around our own necks. This latter we always do eventually when we begin to think we have a power greater than the power of good and that we can use it to get what we desire of life no matter what the consequences to others. Whether we know it or not, such thinking always shows, and it bears fruit even unto the third and fourth generation. Here's an example of how it works. A woman came to me about her grandson, aged 8. She had returned from Europe after a long stay during which her sole purpose had been to find happiness. She failed in this, she said, and came back to learn that her only grandchild had been committed to an institution for the mentally sick. "He's no more crazy than you are," she declared hotly. Much questioning revealed the fact that her anger was really against her former son-in-law, the boy's father, and that man's second wife. They had him put in because they wanted to get rid of him, she stormed in fine fury. The facts were these. The boy's father and mother had been divorced when he was about 5 after many court and private battles involving bitter and unsavory accusations. The boy had been awarded to his mother. She remarried. The stepfather did not like the child, was jealous of the attention his mother gave him, and refused to have the boy around. The mother then sent him to live with his father and his father's people. These people hated the boy's mother, constantly maligned her, and tried to turn him against her. Next, the boy's father remarried, and the stepmother did not want the boy, for his behavior had grown so bad she couldn't manage him. The father then wanted the mother to take the boy back, but she, angered at all the stories told against her and at the child's attitude to her because of them, refused to take him. So he ended up in a boarding school. Soon the boy had set out on a program of cruelty that shocked the adults around him. He tortured his pets until they had to be taken from him. He played horrible tricks on nurses, servants, and teachers. He finally was committed to the institution as the only thing that can be done with him. His latest escapade there had been to evade his guards, find a little frog on the grounds, and cut it up into bits while it was still alive because he liked to see it be hurt. The child's difficulties had begun when he was about 3.5, with stuttering and violent fits of rage. "I just don't know what got into T," said his grandmother. "He's bright, and he was a sweet baby the last time I saw him." She had not seen him since he was 3 years old. "Hate, hurt, and a desire for revenge have got into him," I said. Not knowing a higher law of life, the poor child is trying to strike back and take an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. He is trying to protect himself in the only way he knows. He behaves like a savage because he believes the world is a savage place. If he cannot hurt people larger than himself, then he must save face and get revenge by hurting something smaller. This makes him feel secure in an insecure world. It proves his powers to himself. Since he does not have the security of love, he must try to get it by making others afraid of him. He is only upholding the law of self-preservation on his level of understanding. The history back of the child covered 2 generations of 2 families which had lived their lives and created their fortunes outside the law of loving God, their fellow men, and their highest selves. Both pairs of the child's grandparents had been divorced. The grandfathers had piled up dollar fortunes by any means at hand, proud of their wit and cunning and cheating partners, underpaying their employees, and being unfaithful to God, their fellow men, and their own wives. They betrayed trust placed in them and yet seemed to flourish like the green bay tree, always being 2 jumps ahead of their opponent, said the grandmother. Each side of the house hated and mistrusted the other, indulging in quarrels, accusations, and general strife. They tormented their own flesh, as the Bible puts it. Their enemies were the thoughts and beliefs which led to their acts. Thus the child's parents had been brought up to think against the laws of good for all. They belonged to a fashionable social set which spent its time traveling, drinking, dressing up, dancing, and hunting for thrills. The dollar fortunes acquired were so substantial that neither of the young parents ever had to think about earning money. They had never heard about the desirability of laying up treasures in heaven, much less did they know how to go about doing so. They spent their lives trying to find a happiness, a meaning to life which forever eluded them. They knew so little of the laws of good that they made one tragic mistake after another, which would have to be rectified some day if they were to have happiness, peace of mind, and soundness of body. The grandmother had come to me for help, hoping to have the child released to her and saying he'd never hurt me. I'd find a good, strong nurse who would scare him, control him, and break him of those habits. He's already been broken too badly now, I reminded her. What he needs is building up. He needs to be persuaded, loved, and shown, not controlled. The grandmother's real desire was not to help the child. What she wanted was to get even with her hated former son-in-law and that second wife of his who had brazenly stolen him away from her daughter and caused the divorce in the first place. I explained that, in my opinion, there was only one thing to do that would help the child, and that was truly to love him and let him know that he was loved. The first step in helping him is to get him to feel safe and wanted. But don't you think that my former son-in-law should be punished? After my 4 hours talk to her, she went away almost as ignorant of the law of love as she had been when she had come. I was wearied in spirit, sure the whole time had been wasted, but once again I learned that no honest effort is ever wasted. Not all the seed had fallen on barren ground. Enough had lodged in fertile soil to make her return not long after, looking 10 years older, to say, I shall never have another moment's rest as long as T is in that institution. I have been talking to his grandfather, my first husband, the father of my daughter, and he feels the same way. And I guess his grandparents on his father's side are pretty unhappy too. We can't get him released. Nor could the child's parents ever drink so much or pursue pleasure so madly that they did not wonder what the child was doing at that moment, whether he was trying to cut a little frog into bits or planning the destruction of a fellow human being. The end product of 4 grandparents, 2 parents, and 2 enormous fortunes had not grown to be a flower of civilization and a credit to his heritage, but a child monster, something so dreadful it was talked about only in whispers. Why did it have to happen to us? The grandmother whimpered bitterly. My only grandchild, the sole heir to all our money. It didn't happen. It resulted. The corrupt tree does not produce good fruit. Good trees produce good fruit. If we want figs and not thistles, we must produce a fig tree. God never is mocked, and love is the nature of God, the highest law of the universe. We tinker with that law, try to outwit it, at the cost of our lives. Oh, but that is an extreme case, someone may say. Yes, it is. But between that extreme case and the tiniest shady dealing against a brother, the smallest thought outside the law of love, veering from the path of right and good for all, we can see human wrecks of unhappiness, failure, grief, disappointment, sickness, poverty, and every manner of unwanted results, all attributable to one thing: failure to understand the nature of love, failure to think with love. As we think, so we are, we do, and we have. We cannot too often remember that the purpose of all human life is growth toward greater good. This is accomplished by using our free will to desire and to work for good. This is the process Paul refers to as being transformed by the renewing of our mind. For it is a mental process. We grow from the inside. By thinking with love, we refine our minds, bodies, and souls. We put off the flesh man. We put on the Christ man, the free will, the liberated soul bound only by our soul's desire and unfettered by instincts and flesh rule. Hence Paul says, Christ in you, the hope of glory. It is by trying to use this highest Christ mind within us, the mind of pure love, that we turn matter into spirit, corruption into honesty, and death into eternal life. If we want to learn how to think with love, let us study the life and works of Jesus Christ. For he was the perfected man, the very spirit of love become flesh, the kind of man all men may someday be when they have learned how to live within the laws of love and choose to do so to the extent that Jesus knew and chose. That is what evolution is striving for, the man perfected in Christ. With all our hearts, minds, and souls, we can rely on the teachings of Jesus. This man of Nazareth was indeed the forerunner of the future, evolved man. He was the first Christ man on earth whose coming was foreseen and foretold by prophets for generations. Jesus is an example of what a man is when he is truly born of God or the Spirit of love. Love is of God, and everyone that loveth is begotten of God. From the book of John, chapter 4, verse 7. Christ is the pattern of what the future man can be after he has learned what love is and is willing to be born again with no ambition, desire, plan, or thought outside of love. How long will it take the whole human race to catch hold of the truths Jesus taught? To reach the height of love Jesus reached? No one can say. Dunoui, in his great work, Human Destiny, says Jesus may have been 1,000,000 years ahead of the race. If we had 1,000,000 years on earth in which to observe what happens when we start to think and to live contrary to all good, we'd see that we cannot cheat the law by act, the letter, nor by intent, the spirit. We can simply accept it now as truth beyond question and start to live within the highest of all laws, watching miracles of good happen to us and for us. We need not understand the perfect love of the Father as Jesus understood it in order to be able to call on and use it. We have only to take Jesus' advice and become a trusting little children, realizing that there is a power, a divine plan so stupendous, so far beyond our present ability to understand that we cannot possibly cope with it. But we can trust. We can desire to be good. We can control our thoughts, desires, and acts. If we do that, we shall be growing toward God, and that is all we need to do or to know at this stage of our evolution. We have now considered the 4 steps necessary in order to establish love as the highest law of our lives. To establish, says Webster, means to prove and cause to be accepted as true, to put beyond doubt or dispute. To use the methods as given in the last 4 chapters is to establish the law. It now remains for us to take the final steps, working with and trusting the law. In a sense, we are working with and trusting the law in all our affirmations and daily exercises. Let's pause here and talk about you and your problem. What do you think about most of the time? Write it down. Now examine it carefully. Do you think about the lack or the fulfillment of that lack? Do you think about good news or bad news as it comes up daily? Are you angry with anyone? If so, let not the sun go down upon your wrath. The angry thoughts and feelings you hold against another are hurting you and keeping you from making your demonstration. Is there anyone who has a just and rightful claim upon your heart, time, and money which you have not met? If so, go to meet it, and do not hope to make your demonstration in full until you have done so. We have man-made laws which demand punishment for the adult who contributes to the delinquency of a minor. Likewise, there are spiritual laws which will punish the more highly developed person who uses his mentality to overcome a lesser mind for evil purposes. If your work requires of you any domination, leave it. Attach yourself to work that is spiritually good, in line with God's plan of good for all men, or you will eventually suffer. It is impossible to feel absolutely free and on an equal footing with all men until we are right with God, within our own mind, and know that we are. When we learn to think with the mind of love, we shall have no more problems, no more fears. Therefore, my friend, you do not face as many problems as there are hours in the day or days in your life. There's only one problem. Learn how to work with God. Go to your closet or meditation room. Think over the facts of existence as you now know them. Come again to the decision to let the very spirit or intent of good rule your life. Then say, Father, I earnestly ask the same mind be in me which was in Christ Jesus. I desire to learn how to think with love. Then live up to your prayer. Try to see good all around you. Try to relax and be happy knowing you are in God's care, knowing that no matter how many mistakes you have made or yet may make, they can all be forgiven by your calling on God for forgiveness. The very desire to lead a better life is prayer in itself and does not go unanswered. If the road sometimes seems long and you seem to be making little or no progress, do not despair. Struggle is normal for man until he has finally learned to think with love. Each struggle carries you just that much farther ahead. The effort to be good accumulates good. So look up and be lifted up. Keep on thinking good thoughts, desiring good, and good will come as day follows night. And always, always be of good cheer. End of chapter 6. If you haven't done so yet, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and head over to the next video where I will be there waiting for you for part 3, how to work with the law of love.